Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 730 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, Sean Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, and today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. And today, we're going to do an episode. It's kind of a themed episode and something that I've been looking to do. I've even mentioned it once or twice in some prior shows. Basically, I just want to kind of take inventory as it pertains to the New York Rangers, look up and down the roster, and come to a conclusion on every single player, whether they have either exceeded expectations for the season, whether they have met expectations for the season, or whether they have fallen short of expectations for the season. It's going to be a pretty casual list here. I haven't really looked at it all that closely. I kind of want to just put myself on the spot here and just go through the roster as it is currently constructed. You know, we're 30 games into the season, so a little bit past the 1/3 mark of the campaign here, and you know, this is something that we could always go back to a little bit later. Maybe when we're about 2/3 of the way through the season, we'll do something similar and kind of re-examine everything and who stepped up and who's fallen off a little bit, all that good stuff. But we got a lot of players to get through here today and not a lot of time to do it, so we're going to zip through this thing, spend just about a minute or so on every player, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, depending on who we're talking about. And the way we'll do this here is we'll start with the forwards, we'll work our way to the defensemen and goalies, and we will use the line combinations that the Rangers are currently using at practice. As it turns out, the Rangers, it looks like they're going to stick with the line combinations that we saw at the end of the game against the Devils, which, you know, Ranger fans are going to have mixed feelings about that because it means that Kakko and Lafreniere don't get to play with Mika Zibanejad, at least not at the moment. But the top line, as it's currently constructed, is Mika Zibanejad centering Artemi Panarin and Barclay Goodrow. And we'll go ahead and start with the bread man. I think we'll work our way from left to right across all these lines as we kind of go through the roster here. And as far as Artemi Panarin and expectations, I'm going to say that he has exceeded expectations so far this season. I know some Ranger fans, toward the end of the playoff run last year were a little bit down on him. Panarin, it got to a point where a lot of us thought that maybe he was playing injured or there was something wrong. He just didn't have the look of that confident, decisive player that we all know him to be. Very, very strange, very, very rare to see Artemi Panarin lacking in confidence. And there's been times this season where, he's been a little bit up and down. I mean, you could pretty much say that about the entire roster, given the fact that the Rangers went through some serious struggles before this more recent 4-game winning streak. And, not everything's been perfect with Panarin or otherwise during this winning streak, but the Rangers have seemingly, righted the ship at least a little bit and are hopefully back on the right track. But as for Artemi Panarin, 35 points in 30 games. I would think you would expect him to have more goals than he has, but we know Panarin, he's kind of an assist-first guy. He's been racking up the helpers at just a ridiculous rate over the last handful of games here, doing it so casually. He's also made a couple of hustle plays that have really kind of stood out recently, pressuring the puck in the overtime period and getting the puck away from, I believe it was Tatar of the Devils, and then setting up Filip Chytil for the game-winning overtime goal. And then also, there was a game not too long ago where he was really busting it on his back check and broke up a scoring opportunity either against Vegas or Colorado. I want to say Colorado was one of those teams, but an important play in that game as well. So Artemi Panarin getting the job done, giving us pretty much what we would expect from the bread man. His bar is so high, you might almost expect more than 35 points in 30 games. But for me, I think Artemi Panarin is getting the job done for the Rangers. And I will say, despite the bar being very high for him, he is exceeding expectations this season. Ditto for Mika Zibanejad, one of the premier two-way centers in the NHL today. He's got 33 points in 30 games, 15 goals, 18 assists. And he, too, like a lot of Rangers, nobody played well during that stretch where they were losing 6 out of 7 games or whatever it was. But, you talk about somebody that just does a little bit of everything. Not even a little bit of everything. Mika Zibanejad does a lot of everything to help this New York Ranger team win games. Very important player, certainly on the power play. Does an excellent job on the penalty kill. And somebody that, I don't think really saw a ton of time on the penalty kill up until recent seasons. And, he took to it like a duck to water and one of the more important players out there. He's worked hard to get better at his faceoffs, although he is scuffling a little bit this season, down to 45.1%. But, you hope that last season after he was right around 50%. He'll eventually pick it up there as well. But Mika Zibanejad, very important player for this team. He can play with anybody. We saw Kakko and Lafreniere play with Mika not too long ago, and they both got a boost from that. And now he's out there with Panarin and Goodrow. So Mika Zibanejad, man, I'll take him up against just about any center in this league, and I will say he is exceeding expectations. Barclay Goodrow. So I know there are Ranger fans that aren't necessarily thrilled about the fact that he is in the top 6, but I think Barclay Goodrow overall has done a pretty nice job for this New York Ranger team. He's got 13 points in 30 games, which is about right, given his career projections. I think he's got a chance to eventually eclipse that. So I'm going to say Barclay Goodrow, another guy who, important part of the penalty kill, kind of a Swiss Army knife. He can play all 3 positions. He can move up and down the lineup. I will say he has exceeded expectations so far this season. Another guy who brings a certain amount of snarl to the rink every single night. There's a lot of focus on Jacob Trouba and him, getting into some fights recently and doing everything he can to spark the team. I think Barclay Goodrow is another one of those guys, just kind of a lunch pail mentality, brings it every single night. He's gotten into a couple of fights himself. He'll play physical, he'll hit, good face-off guy as well, although this season, another guy that you would expect to be at more than 50%, he's at 47.1%. But Goodrow overall done a nice job for the Rangers. I will say he's exceeding expectations thus far in this season. And again, one of those guys you can move all over the lineup, and I think coaches like having at least one player like that on the roster. Then we go to the kid line, and we will start, first of all, Lafreniere, Hedel, Kakko left to right. We'll start with Alexis Lafreniere, and I am going to say, even though his usage is sometimes leaving something to be desired as far as Ranger fans are concerned, a lot of times he's out of the top 6 and he never gets a chance really on the power play. So far, I'm going to say Alexis Lafreniere has fallen a little bit short of expectations this season, and it's not because, he's played terrible hockey or anything like that, but, he is in year 3 here, 30 games, 5 goals and 8 assists for a total of just 13 points. So not even averaging a half a point per game. And, at least as far as points are concerned, I would say that, we would have probably have expected as Ranger fans for him to be adding a little bit more offensively than he has thus far. And I agree with Ranger fans that want to see him, in the top power play unit, maybe once in a while, give him a chance there, maybe make him a little bit more of a fixture in the top 6. I get it. But Lafreniere, yeah, I think a lot of us would probably expect him to be a little bit farther along, and just hasn't really had a whole lot of plays this season that really give you that wow factor. We saw it last year, I believe it was against Detroit, where he played the puck between his own legs and scored, just a ridiculous goal there. He played very well in the playoffs as well, and I think that's one of the reasons why I'm going to say he fell short of expectations thus far, is because we saw him play very well in the postseason last year, and I think a lot of us were expecting that to bleed into this season. Hasn't really to date, and I'm still hopeful for Lafreniere, but I'm going to say falling a little bit short of expectations thus far. Philip Hedel. I'm going to say Hedel has given you, he's in between. He is somebody who has given us about what we expected this season. 14 points in 22 games. He's had to deal with a couple of injuries, 6 goals and 8 assists. But like Lafreniere and like Kakko, and we're going to talk about him in a second, the reason why I can't say he's exceeded expectations is because this kid line played very, very well in the postseason last year, and I think we're waiting for one or more of these guys to completely just explode this season. Hedel, look, I mean, he's really brought it when it comes to 5v5 play. He's up there without looking at the numbers as far as even strength points per game for the Rangers, and probably even more so if you look at even strength points per minute. So I like what Philip Hedel has done. He obviously won the last game in overtime and playing a lot better this season than he did or than he was around this time last year in the regular season. He was a healthy scratch for a game or two during the regular season around this time last year. But I just have really high expectations for the kids. So I can't quite say that he's exceeded expectations, but I'm going to say that Philip Hedel is right around what you would expect if you're a Ranger fan, which I can only assume most of you listening to this are. Kaapo Kakko, I'm going to say that he has fallen short of expectations with just 10 points in 30 games. Now, I'll be the first one to say he has certainly not had luck on his side. Goalie will make a ridiculous save, or he'll hit the post. He's hit a lot of posts this season. There's situations where he doesn't really get much of a chance on the power play. You could pretty much say the exact same things about Kakko that I just said about Alexis Lafreniere. Occasionally he'll be in the top 6, but it never really seems to last that long. And we'll see, because right now this kid line is listed as the Rangers' second line. And we'll see if that comes to fruition in the game against the Toronto Maple Leafs. My hope is that it will. But I will say Kakko, thus far, even though he's played well, even though he works hard every single night, even though his puck possession skills are very, very good, and he's obviously he's often the guy driving the play, regardless of what line he plays on. I just can't really get over the fact that he's only got 10 points in 30 games, and so I have to say for that reason, he's fallen a little bit short of expectations. But Kakko maybe more so than any of the young players in the Rangers. If somebody's just going to go off in the second half of the season, I think it could very easily be Kaapo Kakko. So fingers crossed that happens, and if we do this episode again in the future, fingers crossed that, he's one of the guys that goes from, not quite meeting expectations to actually exceeding expectations. So we're going to keep this thing rolling with the bottom six, and then, of course, the defensemen and the goalies in just a second. But first, I just got to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league. From pro football to college bowl season to basketball and hockey and the World Cup, we've got it all at BetOnline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can even find those on BetOnline as well. We are always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. And to go ahead and just keep moving things along here. Well, actually, first of all, let me just thank you guys for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. And now to keep things moving along, we will turn our attention to the bottom six. You've got right now, left to right, Kreider, Trocheck, Vesey. We'll start with Kreider. I'm going to say Kreider so far this season has met expectations for the New York Rangers. Last year, I'm not going to hold him to 52 goals because that's a ridiculous total. It's very difficult for even the best players in this league to do that a single time, much less 2 seasons in a row. But Kreider, you look at his numbers, 14 goals, 10 assists for a total of 24 points. I mean, he's on pace to score just about 40 goals this season. That would be an extremely impressive follow-up to what was just a ridiculous and borderline unsustainable season last season. The problem that people have with Kreider, and I've talked about it at times here, is he doesn't go to work when it comes to board battles as much as he could. There's games where, he just doesn't look like he's completely dialed in as much as you would like him to be, and as much as you'd like somebody on this Ranger team that's considered a leader to be. A lot of people, myself included, were kind of looking for Chris Kreider to maybe be the next captain of this team. He, of course, was not. They go with Jacob Trouba, and that's all well and good. But I would say with Kreider, the streakiness is not unexpected. It kind of went away last season, but for the most part in his career, very streaky, very up and down, very hot and cold player. So I will say Kreider has met expectations, still a good player on the power play, still an important part of the penalty kill. Kreider has met expectations this season. Vincent Trocheck. I'm going to say another player here who has met expectations. He comes over as really the only big free agent that the Rangers signed. I mean, who was their second biggest free agent signing? Yaroslav Halak, Ryan Carpenter. So he was kind of the prize get for the Rangers when it came to free agency season. 10 goals, 10 assists, 20 points in 30 games. He's also a -8, but he has dominated on the faceoff circle. He is at 56.2%, so I think you have to like that if you're a Ranger fan. We've gone through so many seasons where this team always wins less than half of its faceoffs. So to get somebody that can succeed at a 56% clip, that's obviously very important. And Trocheck, another one of those guys that's kind of a Swiss Army knife. You can move him up and down the lineup. I mean, he's only going to play center, but you can move him up and down as far as what line he's on and who he's playing with. He's currently on the third line, and a guy who, comes over and fills Ryan Strom's spot in the top power play unit and has done a pretty solid job there. I know certain Ranger fans want other people to get a chance in place of Trocheck, but Trocheck's been a pretty good player on that top power play unit, big-time penalty killer as well. And as I've described him in the past, one of those guys that's kind of a B+ at everything. I think he's kind of continued that with the Rangers. So I will say Vincent Trocheck has met expectations this season. Jimmy Vesey. I'm going to say Vesey has exceeded expectations, and it's not because, he's lighting up the score sheet every single night. In fact, where are his stats here? He's got 3 goals and 6 assists for a total of 9 points in 29 games. It's really not that impressive. And look, I know there's people that, have a problem with Jimmy Vesey being on the top line instead of one of the kids being there. I haven't always been the biggest fan of that either. But just the fact that Vesey has played well enough where he can even be considered to be on the Ranger top line or be on the Ranger second line or wherever he might be, that's a positive. This is somebody that was not even a guarantee to make the team. He was in camp on a PTO. He signs a 1-year deal at the league minimum of $750,000. Done an excellent job on the penalty kill. We were talking about him in the most recent episode and how well he did against the Devils anytime they had the man advantage in that game. So Jimmy Vesey, I will say somebody who has exceeded expectations this season, in part because I don't think expectations were too high. And I don't think Ranger fans, have a problem with VZ being in the lineup or anything like that. I think certain fans just get upset when he's in the top 6, and I can certainly understand that. But VZ has exceeded expectations. Sammy Blais, we go to the 4th line. He is at the left wing spot. You've got Johnny Brodzinski at center and Julien Gauthier at right wing. We will begin with Sammy the Bull here. And I think you have to say that Sammy Blais has fallen short of expectations this season. Now, I do sympathize with, him being taken out, the dirty play last year, misses the entire season, misses the Ranger playoff run, had a chance to maybe be an important player on the 4th line. He does play very, very physical, but I did not think that in this season, Sammy Blais, who was given some consideration to potentially play on the top line, we saw him out there with Kreider and Mika in the preseason a couple of times, and, he's got 5 assists in 27 games, and I realize he's not somebody that's going to be a scoring juggernaut, but I was expecting at least a little bit more than that. Doesn't really kill penalties. He's on the second power play unit, but they barely play, and he hasn't really made any kind of an impact there either. So I got to say, despite the fact, and again, I do sympathize, and I am grading on a little bit of a curve here, the fact that he came back from the torn ACL, but I just look at what he's done so far this season, and I can't sit here and say that, oh yeah, he's done great for the Rangers. I would say Blais fallen a little bit short of expectations. Johnny Brodzinski. This one's kind of tough because he's only played 4 games for the Rangers, does not have any points. I will say, and again, very small sample size, I will say thus far, though, Johnny Brodzinski has exceeded expectations for the Rangers. One of those guys that always has his legs going, always seems to give an honest effort, and seems to have given that 4th line a little bit of a boost. So in a very small sample size, I will say that Johnny B has exceeded expectations this season. We move to the right wing, Julien Gauthier. I'm going to say he has met expectations because right now, and, honestly, probably even at this point last year, I didn't really have a whole lot of expectations for Gauthier. I mean, he's only got 4 goals and 2 assists for 6 points in 22 games. You could honestly say that he's exceeded expectations with numbers like that. We all hold out hope and we all keep our fingers crossed that he'll eventually get it going and eventually become, a solid, at least 3rd line right winger in this league. But just too inconsistent to really say that he's done that. But again, given that the expectations weren't that high, and given the fact that he's played some physical hockey this season, and that 4th line has been playing, fairly well recently, I will say Julien Gauthier has met expectations so far this season. We've got a couple of bonuses here, guys that are not currently in the lineup, but guys that we're going to talk about anyway. Vitaly Kravtsov, let's see, he has been a healthy scratch recently, and I know a lot of Ranger fans are not too happy about that. They want to see him in the lineup. They want to see him get a chance in the top 6, possibly on the Panarin line. Facts are facts here, though, guys. Vitaly Kravtsov in 30 games in his NHL career now has 3 goals and 3 assists, 6 points in 30 games. So it's not, and I know he hasn't always been given great opportunities. He played on the Panarin line for a little while this season, didn't really seem to stick there. The Rangers right now are trying to win games, and I get the fact that people want to see him at least in the lineup. You could take out a Julien Gauthier, you could take out a Johnny Brodzinski, who is a 29-year-old, mostly career AHL player. You could take out Sammy Blais, who hasn't really done anything to show that he should be in the lineup night in and night out. You could maybe even take out Jimmy Vesey. I get all that. And, you could move Goodrow out of the top 6, maybe put Vitaly Kravtsov there. These are all options. But in the time that he's, suited up for the Rangers, and this doesn't even take into consideration the fact that he's quit on this franchise twice, he hasn't really produced. And again, I would like to see what he could do. There's a lot of raw skill there. Hopefully the Rangers can eventually pull it out of him, and I do think he deserves another chance, but I have to say that Vitaly Kravtsov thus far this season has fallen short of expectations, and I'm sympathetic to him too with all the injuries that he's gone through. Hopefully he can stay healthy when he gets back out there. And Ryan Carpenter, I think you got to say he's fallen short of expectations. There weren't really high expectations, but I don't think he played particularly well. He was immediately outplayed by Johnny Brodzinski as soon as Brodzinski got in the lineup, placed on waivers, and sent to the AHL. So I think you have to say that Carpenter has fallen short of expectations so far this season as well. We're going to keep everything going with the defensemen and the goalies, and we will do that in just a second. All right, Ranger Demon. Ryan Lindgren, I think you have to say that he is, I'm going to say he's exceeded expectations so far this season. I knew coming into this season how important he was to the Rangers. I don't think me or maybe even any of us knew the fact that this guy is basically the heart and soul of this New York Ranger team. When he comes out of the lineup, there is a profound impact, not just defensively, like top to bottom, front to back, the forwards, the goalies, the other defensemen, even Adam Fox, his game seems to tail off a little bit whenever Lindgren isn't out there. I don't think Ryan Lindgren's importance to this team can possibly be understated at this point. And, he's got 8 assists in 28 games, no goals. He's not really out there for offense, even though he can chip in offensively every once in a while. But Ryan Lindgren does a fantastic job for this New York Ranger team. Hard-hitting, old-school, gritty player. You guys know we've talked about this. Leads the NHL in blood spilled and never misses a shift no matter what happens to him. So Ryan Lindgren has exceeded expectations. Adam Fox, I'm kind of torn between either has met expectations or exceeded them. And the reason for that is because, again, with a player like Adam Fox, the bar is set so high. But I'm going to say Adam Fox has exceeded expectations. I think anytime you have a defenseman who is at more than a point per game, they automatically have exceeded expectations. And Adam Fox, so far this season, third on the Rangers with 31 points. He's got 7 goals and 24 assists. Somebody who, for the most part, I think shows up pretty much every night. Even when the Rangers were going through that really rough patch, that really dry spell there, and guys were sleepwalking, Adam Fox was one of the few that, to me at least, looked like he was mostly bringing it every single night. He's outstanding defensively, such a smooth puck handler. He's very, very good at, faking like he's going to pass one way and then shoot, or acting like he's going to skate over here and then passing back the other way. Very deceptive game. Adam Fox employs, when he's out there. And obviously a very important part to both the power play and the penalty kill. It's not uncommon to see him rack up like 6, 7, 8 minutes of special teams time per night. So Adam Fox, I will say, has exceeded expectations this season. We move to the second pairing for the Rangers, K'Andre Miller. He has played better recently, and I have every expectation in the world that he's going to go on to have a very solid season and a very nice career for himself. But thus far this season, I will say that he has fallen short of expectations. We saw him play as good or better than any other Ranger defenseman in the playoffs last season. And, just had the look of somebody that was a budding superstar, an emerging superstar in this league. Did a little bit of everything, could chip in offensively, has a nasty slap shot. Unfortunately, he's only got 1 goal as a result of that this year. 1 goal, 11 assists, and 12 points. But yeah, him and Trouba were just scuffling to an unbelievable degree at the start of the season, and certainly through that losing streak as well. So Miller, I will say he's fallen short of expectations, but I will also say that he has as good of a chance of anybody on this team. If we do this list again later in the season, and I think we will about 2/3 of the way through, he has as good of a chance of anybody from going from falling short of expectations to exceeded expectations, because I still really believe in K'Andre Miller. The Rangers do a really nice job developing defensemen, and I think this is just kind of one of those things, just kind of a rough patch, and hopefully he can get it right, and I think he's already, trending in that direction for sure. Then, of course, his defense partner, Jacob Trouba. I will say that he has fallen short of expectations this season as it pertains to his play on the ice. But if I can do like a cheat a little bit here and give him a grade as the new New York Ranger captain, I will say that he has exceeded expectations. I know a lot of people weren't happy with the helmet throw. Bottom line, the results speak for themselves. The Rangers are 4-0 since he did that. He held the players-only meeting when he deemed it appropriate. He always faces the music after the game is over, always answers the questions openly and honestly, and does it without throwing teammates under the bus. He'll call them out a little bit, but he never singles out any certain player. And, I think he does a nice job towing that line of, a little bit of a call out, but not going overboard and not going crazy about it. As far as his play on the ice, that has certainly left something to be desired this season. I thought he was starting to turn it around a little bit, and maybe he is. A bit of a rough game against the Devils, though, with the 2 turnovers that led to 2 Devils goals. But somebody with that lunch pail mentality and somebody that, I think is going to do a nice job as the New York Ranger captain. So I'm a little bit torn. You almost have to give out 2 separate grades. His grade as captain and his grade as far as on-ice play is concerned. I will have to say, though, Jacob Trouba, as far as the on-ice play, has fallen short of expectations this season. Like Miller, though, I think he has a good chance of turning it around and playing the kind of hockey that we saw him play last season. Third defense pairing. Right now, you've got Libor Hajek and Braden Schneider. Hajek, I'm going to say, has met expectations this season because I don't think too many Ranger fans had high expectations for him coming into the year. He went through a stretch, and obviously he was battling Zach Jones for that 6th and final defenseman spot, and has apparently won that battle, at least for the time being, because Zach Jones is in the AHL, and Libor Hajek is here, and he's been playing every single game. He went through a spell there where he was playing, just solid, pretty much mistake-free hockey, and sometimes with your 6 defensemen, that's all you really need. I thought he did a nice job there. Fell off for a little while. I thought he had a decent game against the Devils the other night. So I will say he's met expectations, partially because the expectations were low. But, Hayek, you just kind of keep your fingers crossed that he can do what I just said and just play competent hockey, not be the reason why you lose games if you're the New York Rangers. And we'll see if the Rangers look to upgrade there at some point, at or near the trade deadline. I think there's a decent chance that they will. But for the time being, Hayek has met expectations. We move to the other side of the ice. Hayek's current defense partner. And I know Schneider's been playing with Miller a little bit recently. I went with kind of the old school lineup here, and we'll just do it that way for today. But as far as Braden Schneider is concerned, I will say that he is definitely 100% exceeded expectations for the New York Rangers this season. I talked just a minute ago about how Miller has fallen short of expectations and struggled a little bit. Same thing for Jacob Trouba. The fact that those two guys who you count on so much if you're a member of the New York Rangers coaching staff, or if you're just a fan of this team, a media member, whatever it might be, a podcast host, the fact that those two have fallen short makes it all the more important that Braden Schneider has really stepped up his game this season, because for a while there, it was kind of like, okay, what is going on with the Ranger defensemen? Even Lindgren went through, a mini hiccup earlier this season, and it got to the point where it was like, none of the Ranger defensemen are really playing all that well, except for maybe Adam Fox, but Lindgren quickly turned it around, as I think we all thought that he would. Miller and Trouba, like I said, it's been mixed results so far this season. Braden Schneider has been very steady, has improved since making his debut last season. Obviously he went through the playoff run with the New York Rangers and debuting at the age of 20, and for the most part has hit the ground running at the NHL level. 30 games this season, 4 goals, 3 assists, for a total of 7 points. He's also a +6 for what that is worth. But again, just one of those old school, gritty, hard-hitting, hard-nosed defensemen. And I think just Braden Schneider has done a heck of a job this season. He's somebody that has seen his ice time increase, has seen his role with this team increase, and somebody that looks like the Rangers hit on as it pertains to, former first-round draft picks. They drafted him. The book on him was that this guy is a very safe floor, will be a very solid NHL defenseman, and thus far, he is proving the Rangers right for making that selection there. And just want to throw out the fact that the Rangers, on draft day, traded up to get in front of the Devils, who they themselves ended up taking a defenseman. So it's entirely possible if the Rangers didn't do that, Braden Schneider would be a Devil right now, and that would certainly be unfortunate. But Braden Schneider's been awesome so far this season, has definitely exceeded expectations. Kind of as a bonus, we'll throw in Zach Jones. I realize he's on the Wolfpack this season, but he got a chance to start the season with the Rangers, and I will have to say that he has fallen short of expectations, given the fact that he is no longer on the Ranger roster, given the fact that Libor Hayek beat him out for that 6th defenseman job. I'm not going to give up on Zach Jones, but for the time being, I think for all those reasons, you have to say that he has fallen short of expectations. And that just leaves the goalies, and we will start with Igor Shesterkin. It feels so weird saying this. I'm going to say that Igor Shesterkin has fallen short of expectations so far this season. That's not to say he's played bad hockey. He hasn't at all. He's played good hockey. It's just that when you're coming off of an historic season, a season that, is one of the best that we've really ever seen a goalie have, a season where the guy was a human highlight reel every single night, a season where he was far and away the best goalie in the league, the expectations at that point become sky high. And so then you go into the next season, you let in 1 or 2 soft goals, you have 1 or 2 off nights, you maybe don't make a highlight reel save, and people start to say, like, what's going on with Igor? But Igor Shesterkin this season, just to go by the stats, this man is 14, 4, and 4. He has a goals against average of .252, a save percentage of .916, and 1 shutout, and that is a great start to the season. It's just that as Ranger fans right now, we're expecting more than great. We're expecting spectacular. We're expecting him to be the best goalie in the league, or at least one of the best goalies in the NHL. So I will say Igor has fallen short of expectations, but it's only because he set the bar so high for himself with what he did last year. And then finally, that brings us to Yaroslav Halak. He's only played in 8 games, but I got to say he's fallen short of expectations. I think the numbers make it sound worse than it really has been, but I mean, he's won 1 game out of the 6 that he started, 1-6-1 record in those 8 games. Goals against average of .304, save percentage of .888. There's times where he's been a hard luck loser. There's also been some games where he's had some real clunkers as well. So Yaroslav Halak, who I was hoping might be one of the better backups in the league, I think you have to say that he has fallen short of expectations this season. And of course, the Rangers, to switch gears here, going to be in action at home against the Toronto Maple Leafs, who are absolutely on fire. They've won 4 in a row. They have at least 1 point in 15 consecutive games. They've allowed fewer goals than any team in hockey at just 70 goals allowed in 30 games. And on Tuesday, they squeaked past the Ducks 7-0. They have shut out 3 of the last 4 teams that they've played. Their last regulation loss was on November 11th against the Penguins, and they have not lost a road game in regulation since October 29th. So, time to snap all of those streaks, basically, that I just laid out there. Rangers are going to have a heck of a test against this Toronto Maple Leafs team that is clearly firing on all cylinders, has no shortage of firepower, and just great players. But I'm looking forward to the challenge. Rangers are hot themselves. They've won 4 in a row. Going to be a heavyweight matchup. And I think the type of game that, even if you're not necessarily a fan of either one of these teams, you're probably not going to want to miss, because there's stars up and down the roster for both teams, and both teams are hot lately. So definitely looking forward to that. That'll pretty much do it for today, though, guys. Once again, if you'd like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. And definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, that is @LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I'll see you next time. Thanks for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. Available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts.